Millionaire woman marries obese man to prove a point, what he reveals after wedding. Shocks her. Victoria Sterling stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows of her Manhattan penthouse, watching the city pulse with life 40 stories below. At 32, she had built Sterling Industries from the ground up, transforming a small tech startup into a billion-dollar empire. Her sharp business acumen and ruthless determination had earned her respect in boardrooms across America. But lately, something had been gnawing at her soul. The breaking point came during a charity gala 3 months earlier. Victoria had overheard a group of socialites discussing her love life or lack thereof. Their cruel laughter echoed as they speculated about her inability to find a man who wasn't intimidated by her success. The final blow came when one woman suggested that Victoria's standards were impossibly high, that she was too shallow to see past physical appearances. That night, Victoria made a decision that would change everything. She would prove them wrong. She would marry someone society deemed unworthy of her, someone whose value couldn't be measured by conventional standards. It wasn't about charity or pity. It was about demonstrating that true connection transcended superficial judgments. Through a mutual friend who worked at a local community center, Victoria met David Thompson. At 28, David was a gentle soul who worked as a librarian at the New York Public Library. Standing at 5'8" and weighing over 300 pounds, David had spent most of his adult life invisible to the world around him. His kind eyes and warm smile were often overlooked by people who couldn't see past his physical appearance. Their first meeting was awkward but genuine. Victoria found herself drawn to David's intelligence and his passion for literature. He spoke eloquently about classic novels and had an encyclopedic knowledge of American history. More importantly, he treated her like a person, not a business mogul or a trophy to be won. Over the course of 2 months, Victoria orchestrated what appeared to be a whirlwind romance. She took David to expensive restaurants, Broadway shows, and weekend getaways to the Hamptons. To the outside world, it looked like an unlikely love story. To Victoria, it was a carefully planned social experiment. David, meanwhile, was bewildered by the attention from someone like Victoria. He had always been self-conscious about his weight, having struggled with obesity since childhood. His previous relationships had been few and far between, often ending when partners grew tired of the social stigma associated with being seen with him. When Victoria proposed after just 2 months of dating, David was both thrilled and terrified. The engagement announcement sent shockwaves through New York's social circles. Gossip magazines ran stories speculating about Victoria's motives. Some suggested she was having a mental breakdown, while others wondered if David had somehow manipulated her. The very people Victoria sought to challenge were now watching her every move, waiting for the inevitable failure they were certain would come. Victoria's family was less than supportive. Her mother, Margaret Sterling, a prominent socialite from Connecticut, was horrified. She couldn't understand why her successful daughter would throw her life away on someone so beneath her social standing. Victoria's younger brother, James, was more diplomatic but equally concerned about the potential damage to the family's reputation. As the wedding date approached, Victoria found herself genuinely enjoying David's company. He was intelligent, funny, and remarkably patient with her demanding schedule. He never asked for expensive gifts or tried to change her. Instead, he seemed content to simply be part of her world. There were moments when Victoria wondered if her initial motivations were evolving into something more authentic. The wedding ceremony was held at the Plaza Hotel, a small affair attended by close friends and family. Victoria wore a stunning Vera Wang gown that cost more than most people's annual salary, while David looked handsome in a custom-tailored tuxedo that flattered his larger frame. As they exchanged vows, Victoria felt a mixture of triumph and uncertainty. She had proved her point, but what came next? The reception was elegant but tense. Victoria's social circle attended out of curiosity rather than celebration. She could feel their judgment with every glance and whispered conversation. David, meanwhile, seemed overwhelmed by the luxury and attention. He spent most of the evening sitting quietly, observing the spectacle around him with a mixture of wonder and discomfort. As the evening wound down, Victoria felt a strange sense of accomplishment. She had done what she set out to do: challenge society's expectations and prove that love wasn't about appearances. But as she looked at David, now her husband, she realized that her experiment had involved a real person with reelings, and she wasn't sure she had considered the full implications of that. The newlyweds' first night as husband and wife was spent in the presidential suite of the Plaza Hotel. Victoria had spared no expense, decorating the room with roses and champagne, maintaining the facade of a romantic beginning to their marriage. As she changed into an elegant silk nightgown, she felt a mixture of exhaustion and anticipation. The hard part was over. Now she just had to maintain the illusion long enough to prove her point to the world. David sat on the edge of the massive bed, still wearing his dress shirt and pants from the wedding. His hands trembled slightly as he loosened his tie, and Victoria noticed he seemed more nervous than she had ever seen him. She assumed it was natural wedding night jitters, perhaps amplified by his insecurities about his body. She was prepared to be patient and understanding. After all, maintaining this marriage was crucial to her mission. What happened next would haunt Victoria for the rest of her life. David looked up at her with tears streaming down his face, his whole body shaking with emotion. The confident gentleman she had grown to know over the past 2 months seemed to crumble before her eyes. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper, filled with a pain so profound that Victoria felt her heart stop. David revealed that he was dying. Not gradually, not in some distant future, but soon. He had been diagnosed with a rare form of heart disease 18 months earlier, a condition exacerbated by his weight and made worse by years of poor eating habits driven by depression and loneliness. The doctors had given him 12 to 18 months to live, and he was already 8 months into that timeline. The revelation hit Victoria like a physical blow. David explained that he had never expected to find love, had never thought anyone would want to spend their life with him. When Victoria entered his world like a fairy tale, he couldn't bring himself to tell her the truth. He was terrified that she would leave, that his one chance at experiencing real love would disappear if she knew. He was living on borrowed time, but the truth was even more devastating. David had known about Victoria's reputation, had heard the whispers about her social experiment. He had realized early on that their relationship wasn't built on genuine attraction, but on her desire to prove a point. Yet he had stayed silent, grateful for even artificial love, because he had never experienced the real thing. The weight of his confession crushed Victoria's carefully constructed world. David explained that he had spent his entire adult life invisible, overlooked, and dismissed. His obesity had made him a target for cruelty and indifference. He had learned to find joy in small things: a good book, a kind word from a library patron, a beautiful sunset, because he never expected the grand gestures that others took for granted. When Victoria came into his life, she had given him something precious: the experience of being chosen, of being wanted, even if the reasons weren't what they seemed. He had treasured every moment: the fancy dinners, the Broadway shows, the weekend getaways, not because of their luxury, but because for the first time in his life, someone was willing to be seen with him in public. David's tears came harder as he revealed the most heartbreaking truth of all. He had known he was dying when he agreed to marry her. He had known that he would leave her a widow within months. But he had also known that this might be his only chance to experience what it felt like to be someone's husband, to have someone promise to love him, even if those promises were built on false foundations. Victoria's own tears began to fall as she realized the magnitude of what she had done. Her social experiment had used a dying man's desperate desire for love as a prop in her personal crusade. She had been so focused on proving a point about society's shallow standards that she had missed the profound humanity of the person she had chosen to make that point with. The luxury suite around them seemed to mock the gravity of the moment. The champagne sat untouched, the roses seemed garish, and the expensive silk sheets felt like a costume in a play that had suddenly become tragically real. Victoria had orchestrated this entire evening as the triumphant conclusion to her experiment. But instead, she found herself face to face with the devastating consequences of treating someone's heart as a tool for social commentary. David continued his confession, revealing that he had never expected their marriage to last. He had assumed that once Victoria proved her point, she would find a way to gracefully exit their arrangement. He had been prepared to be her temporary statement about love and acceptance, grateful for whatever time she was willing to give him. The fact that she was now his wife, bound to him legally and socially, seemed to overwhelm him with both joy and guilt. As the night wore on, Victoria found herself confronting truths about herself that she had never wanted to acknowledge. Her crusade against shallow judgments had blinded her to her own capacity for using people. She had been so focused on challenging other people's prejudices that she had developed her own assuming that someone like David would be grateful for any attention, regardless of the sincerity behind it. The irony was crushing. Victoria had set out to prove that love wasn't about appearances, but she had ended up demonstrating something far more painful: that love built on false premises could be more devastating than no love at all. She had given David the experience of being chosen while simultaneously proving that his own instincts about being unworthy of genuine love were correct. As dawn broke over Manhattan, Victoria sat beside her new husband, both of them emotionally exhausted. David had finally stopped crying, but his revelation had changed everything. Victoria realized that her experiment had succeeded in ways she never intended. She had indeed learned that love transcended appearances, but she had also learned that genuine connection required honesty, vulnerability, and the courage to risk real rejection. The woman who had built a billion-dollar empire through careful planning and strategic thinking found herself completely unprepared for the raw humanity of the situation she had created. David was not just dying. He was dying while married to someone who had chosen him as a project rather than a partner. The tears she cried that night were not just for David's fate, but for the realization her own heart had been more shallow than those she had sought to challenge. In the quiet moments before sunrise, Victoria made a decision that would define the rest of David's life and her own. She would stop treating their marriage as an experiment and start treating it as what it had become: a sacred trust between two people who had found each other in the most unexpected and imperfect circumstances. She couldn't change her motivations for marrying David, but she could change what their marriage meant going forward. The social experiment was over. The real love story was about to begin, even as time was running out.
Thank you for watching this story unfold with us here on M&A The Story Unfolds. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on the notification bell so you never miss a new tale. We'd love to know where you're watching from. Leave a comment below and tell us what part of the world you're joining us from. Your support means everything. See you in the next story.